Hi, you eight. Today in drama, we are looking at body language and status. Our objective today is to explore the relationship between body language and status. So, to do this, we need to identify three things. We need to identify the features of body language, identify the features of status, and we're going to look at how body language and status can be linked to create meaning. Whenever you see this icon, this means there are tasks that you need to complete and upload onto ClassCharts. So for instance, this could be an entrance task or an exit task, task 1, task 2 for example. Please make sure your responses are in full sentences. Whenever you see this icon, this means there's an extra challenge for you to upload your recorded response. Please remember, you only need to record your voice. If you are submitting a handwritten response, so taking a picture of your work and uploading this to ClassCharts, please remember to check that your image is clearly visible and not too dark to read. So you eight, here's your entrance task. Look at the image, the large hand attached to the string attached to the newspapers, everyone's reading the newspapers. What does this image suggest? Then go a bit further. Is our society like this? How? Why? Provide an example to expand on your answers. So you eight, you don't have to upload a response for this. This is just a task to test your knowledge. So what are the key features of body language? If you remember, there are actually 3 main key features. So you will have 10 seconds to work out the missing letters, but you'll be given 3 letters to start you off. Are you ready? Your 10 seconds start now. Will this letter help? Did you get it right? Fabulous, it's posture. Well done if you did. So posture is the way you stand, and this can communicate how you're feeling. Okay, so here's another one. And again, you've got 10 seconds and 3 letters to start you off. Are you ready? Your 10 seconds starts now. And another letter. Did you get it right this time? Fabulous. So this was gestures. Well done if you did. Now gestures are a form of non-verbal communication, and this is to do with anything to do with your hands between your forehead and your waist. So crossing your arms is a gesture, covering your face is a gesture, hand on your hips, waving is a gesture. See how many gestures you can think of. And another one. So this is the last one. So again, you're going to have 10 seconds, but if you found it difficult to remember the features of body language, you might find this one slightly difficult because you've got 2 words to find and there's a lot more letters. But again, you will have some letters to start you off. So 10 seconds, getting ready. Are you ready? And go. Here's more letters. So do you think you got this one right? That's impressive if you did. So this is facial expressions. So just like gestures, facial expressions are a form of non-verbal communication. So again, telling other people how you're feeling without speaking. So facial expressions could be wide, shocked eyes or squinted eyes, a frown, a massive smile on the face, or an angry face. See how many facial expressions you can think of. What are the key features of body language? Miss Beaumont, Mr. Amar, Mr. Rafi, and Miss Hussain from Team English had a discussion on the features and effects of body language. So as you listen to their discussion, make notes, about 5 to 10 points on their views about the uses of body language. So, Team English, with body language, there are 3 main features of body language. That's facial expressions, your gestures, and postures. So obviously with facial expression, it's the way you smile. You could have a frown, you could have an angry face. With gestures, that's anything between your forehead and your waist to do with your hands. So Miss Beaumont has her arms around her neck, that's a gesture. Mr. Amar's got his arms folded, that's a gesture. A stop sign could be a gesture, your hands on your hips, and waving, or like a religious cross, or praying, that's gestures. And then your posture is the way you stand. And all these are forms of non-verbal communication that tell others how you're feeling. So, let's talk about body language. What benefits do we have with non-verbal communication with body language?
Facial expressions are quite pivotal, especially when it comes to assessments. It's introducing a new character to a play, seeing how they react to certain phrases. So you don't really need context sometimes. Maybe a phrase and a reaction can provide that context for that situation.
Yeah.
I also feel facial expressions are used often, phrases, instructions, your general day-to-day life. But however, with this new climate of COVID, wearing a mask has really reduced facial expressions, so you tend to use more gestures, I believe.
That is so true. I found this experience from I speak a lot with my hands anyway, and then with wearing a mask, like in the supermarket, I find that I'm using my eyes a bit more, and obviously saying sorry to try and get past people. Obviously they can't hear me that much because I've got a mask on. So I've got a hand gesture of sorry, which is kind of just raising my hand up and walking past people. So I found that my hand movements are increased since wearing a mask. Anyone else found anything similar to this?
Well, facial expressions have a lot more meanings in a way, and they add more meaning to the words that you're saying. So sometimes words and the way you're saying certain things can be limited, but the facial expressions can add a bit more context to the sort of tone you're trying to take. So I could say something that could come across that I'm very angry, but I could have a smile on my face or a smirk, and I'm being sarcastic, and then you know that I'm not taking something seriously, and that's really important.
I think posture is really important as well, and it's something that we sometimes don't think about. It doesn't really matter what you say. If you're trying to be a commanding presence, for example, but your posture is perhaps quite hunched over or quite defensive, that can sometimes be quite like a mixed message as well. You need to be able to stand quite strong if you want to be that powerful presence.
True. And that comes in with status, because again, if we're using body language and we're doing like without any voice, you can easily see just by looking at a scene or looking at an image who's in control. But then if the body language, if your posture isn't sharp enough, like it's not clear, then that can be really confusing for an audience member. It's like, who's in control here? But then that's the interesting point, because status can actually change and the body language can change, and it can kind of fleet from person to person, which is quite interesting.
People can sometimes, before they even say anything, the combination of all of non-verbal communications can really put an image of that character. So having a really close body language.
So Miss Beaumont, for example, she's sitting with her arms and legs crossed, but she doesn't look like she's being timid or anything. She
looks quite strong.
She looks quite strong, but however, me on the other hand, I'm sitting with my arms and legs crossed, but I'm holding my wrist and I'm sitting forward, so I'm almost closing myself off, but she's leaning against the chair.
And that's interesting because you're both sat down, but even though you're both sat down, the use of body language again has a different kind of communication to it. So you could argue that Miss Beaumont is quite defensive, like don't you dare come near me, and then yours could be quite more inviting because you're leaning forward as if to like, yeah, that's fine, I'll come and help you. No offense, Miss Beaumont.
That's okay.
But yeah, it could be that it's it depends on how you perceive it.
Exactly, because it could be the complete opposite, because she could be coming across as more confident, like laid back, and Mr. Sen could be coming across as a bit more nervous or anxious.
Yeah,
So
that's a
definitely
good
different
point.
sort of ways of looking at that.
But that's why facial expressions are so important, isn't it? Because that would also tell you a lot about, you know, sitting cross-legged with your shoulders back could be quite an aggressive move, could be quite confrontational, could be quite friendly and relaxed. It just depends on the facial expression.
Yeah, so true. Fabulous, thank you, Mr. English. Okay, did you remember to make notes? So, your task to upload is to write a summary about body language. So think about the importance of body language. Think about the points that Team English just discussed. How can we create meaning through the use of body language? Or, if you're feeling really challenging, try the ultimate challenge. So record and upload your response to the task. But you need to do this within 30 seconds. You cannot say and you can't say body language, and you cannot have any long pauses. Can you do this? Of course you can. In their discussion, Team English mentioned how body language can show status. Status identifies the level of power within a relationship. A character can have high or low status. A character of high status would be someone who's probably powerful, controlling, or authoritative. Or a character of low status could be someone who's very quiet, timid, or maybe withdrawn. And status can be presented in various different ways. So, we have levels. Levels is where a character is higher or lower than another character. High level could be someone who's standing, maybe they're standing on a block or a podium. And a low level could be someone, maybe they're sat down or crouched down or sat on the floor or kneeling. So let's look at this image. We have two images. This is our first image. And here in our first image, we have two characters. One character is of high level and the other is a low level. So the person standing is of high level and the person sat down is a low level. Then in our second image, we again have two characters. One is of a high level and then we have someone who's crouched down on a low level. But look at the use of body language and gestures. So let's go back to our first image. So the person on a high level is slightly bent over, giving something to the character on a low level who's receiving this object. Then, on our second image, the person of a high level is pointing down with their hand on their hip, pointing down at the character on the low level who is covering their face. What does this mean? Status can also be shown through space and pace. So here we have two characters who are sat on either side of a bench. Could this be because they don't know each other? Maybe they don't like each other because they have their backs to each other. Or maybe this is just two characters who are waiting for a bus and sat down looking at their phones as they wait. This is where proxemics comes in. Now proxemics, like status, identifies the relationship between characters. You could also argue that they also have equal status because they're both on the same level. Pace relates to how fast or slow you move on stage. So a fast pace could be quite frantic, quite panicky, whereas a slow pace could be quite intimidating or sneaky, depending on how the actor delivers it. So let's look at our second image. So here we have three characters, and we also have two levels. We have the middle character who's sat on a chair, that's a low level, whereas the two characters on either side, they're a high level because they stood up. Now the question is, now it looks like the two characters who are stood could be walking around that middle character. So if we could bring this image to life, would they walk at a fast pace, frantically around that middle character, or could they walk at a slow, intimidating pace? And the other question is, who has high status? Just because that character in the middle is sat down on a chair, does that mean they're low status or high status? What do you think? Equal and unbalanced status. So again, we look at equal status, where here we have two characters who are sat on a seesaw, sat at the same level, so you could argue that they have equal status. However, with this image, the seesaw is slightly raised. One character is higher than the other. This image suggests that status can change regularly between characters in a performance. Status can also be presented through the use of your voice, the tone of your voice, the pitch of your voice, or the value that you use for your voice, or the pace that you use for your voice. This is your second task to upload. Look at these images. What suggestions can you think of for these images? What scenarios can you think of for these images? Your task is, for each image, create a spider diagram with between 5 to 10 different possible scenarios. You must include a form of body language and status for each scenario. For instance, for image 3, the scenario could be a manager who refuses to listen to an employee. The manager could always frown or roll their eyes at the employee's ideas, and the status could be the use of voice. Okay, so it's time to upload your work. But before uploading, please check that you've completed all tasks and that you've done this to the best of your ability and effort. If you have any queries regarding the task or your work, feel free to leave your question in the feedback section on ClashCharts, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And again, if you're taking a picture of your work and uploading this to ClashCharts, please remember to check that your image is clearly visible and not too dark to read. So take care, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.